What's going on, guys? Sticks here from the Token Minorities, bringing you another deck on Pokemon TCGO, and today I'm bringing you a deck centered around Decidueye-GX from the new Sun and Moon set. And before I get into the deck, just a reminder that if you guys liked this video or found it helpful, please leave a like, drop a comment, and maybe subscribe. It really does help us out a lot and lets us do more for you guys. And as for the question of the day, now that Sun and Moon has been out for a little bit, you've been able to get a sense of what cards are going to impact the meta in what way. And don't get me wrong, the meta is still very, very far from stabilized. But my question of the day is, since you've been able to play with the cards on TCGO, since the cards have been out and all that stuff, what deck has you the most excited, or what card do you think will be the most influential in the upcoming tournaments and in the standard format that includes Sun and Moon? And for any of you guys that have watched any of my set reviews of Sun and Moon or the Sun and Moon expansion, you know how ridiculously hyped about Decidueye I am. I mean, that card, from the moment I saw it, I wanted to use it. I thought it was going to be incredible. I thought that it was going to have a huge impact on the meta. And from what I've seen, while obviously my hype isn't as warranted as it might be for some other cards, and while Decidueye I don't think is like necessarily top tier, I still think it is very impactful, and I think it will be I think it'll be a meta game deck. It will be a deck that people will have to prepare for. Granted, Garbodor does kind of shut it down, but either way, I think Decidueye will have a great impact on the meta, simply because Feather Arrow and Forest Giant Plants, you can get Decidueye's up turn one, spread around damage, and then Hollow Hunt GX is a phenomenal late game attack. So let me know what you guys think, which cards you guys think will be the most meta defining, and why from Sun and Moon, now that you've been able to play with it for a couple of days. But anyway, on to the deck. Like I said, it is centered around Decidueye-GX from the Sun and Moon set, 240 HP, so very, very bulky, and Feather Arrow is why I have so much hype about it. Once during your turn, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. There's no real drawback. Well, there's no drawback at all. It's just literally, okay, I want to put 2 damage counters there. Do it first turn, put 2. Like, if you get 2 Decidueye set up, which with this build, I'm generally able to get at least 1, usually 2 Decidueye set up turn 1, although I have faced some pretty slow starts just because, I mean, I drew some bad hands, which is going to happen with any deck. But Feather Arrow over the course of the game really can just add up damage quite a bit, and is really just a huge ability for this guy, which is why it is so strong. And also Forest Giant Plants being able to get it up turn 1 is ridiculous. And then Razor Leaf, 3 energy, 90. Not particularly great, especially when you consider that Solgaleo also has a 3 energy attack that does 230. Granted, the energy costs are different, and Razor Leaf has no added effect, while Solgaleo you have to discard all the energy attached to it. But Razor Leaf, 3 for 90 is very, very mediocre, but when you couple that with Feather Arrow, all of a sudden this card becomes actually really good. And then Hollow Hunt GX, put 3 cards from your discard pile in your hand. I mean, that's an incredible late game attack. It's like, okay, I have nothing. I have 3 things in my discard pile that I want back into my hand or in my deck. That way you can Hollow Hunt, get those things back, and then if your opponent ends you, well, those things are still back in the deck, so it's not a complete loss if your opponent ends you late game, because those resources that were in the discard pile are now back into your deck. So that is why Hollow Hunt is such a great GX attack. And although it's not like a delete a Pokemon GX attack, it's just an incredible support GX attack, which I actually don't use all that often, I'll be honest, but I can see that it would be very, very, very valuable in some situations. Now, the thing with Decidueye, I could not figure out what I wanted to pair it with. I wanted to pair it with Celebi. That was my initial reaction, the promo Celebi, that you can put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon for the attack, and then it had the Leap Through Time ability, which prevented your opponent from taking prize cards, thus allowing you to get more Feather Arrows down. And I just wanted to mention that because I think that that's a cool option. But one idea that I did come across, I think it was Top Deck Nation and Omnipoke did this back in January, was to pair Decidueye with Tauros-GX, make Tauros the attacker while Decidueye is sitting on the bench. And honestly, since I've been playing with this, I love this composition. I mean, it's ridiculous because Tauros just sits there as a damage sponge while you Feather Arrow your opponent's Pokemon. And then Tauros, first of all, attacks for a DCE. So you can attack turn 2 if you go second with Horn Attack, 2 for 60, which isn't great, but it's not bad. I mean, it is a solid attack, and is something solid to go for just to get some more damage out there for one attachment. And then Rage your opponent. Really, Tauros does a lot of stalling. It makes your opponent think twice about just attacking and getting damage on the board, because Rage, this attack does 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So if your opponent hits you for 100 damage, you're hitting them back for 120 with Feather Arrow. That's taking some knockouts. I mean, Tauros is just a great attacker for Decidueye because you're already running DCE because of Decidueye's Razor Leaf. So putting Tauros right in there as the damage sponge while you Feather Arrow with Decidueye on the bench is just a great combination. And then Mad Bull GX is the delete a Pokemon attack that I was kind of referencing on my Decidueye. This attack does 30 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So if Tauros has 70 damage on it just from like a bursting balloon and another attack or something like that, you're hitting for 210 damage. That is absolutely absurd, and this is the GX attack that you're going to be using more often than not in this deck, is the Tauros Mad Bull GX. You really just use Decidueye on the bench for Feather Arrow, then Tauros does the main attacking. As for the numbers of Pokemon, we're running 3 Tauros because main attack, if your opponent knocks out 3 Tauros, they win. So there's no point in running 4 or 2. You want to have 3 so you have them attacking when you need to. 4/4/4 of Rowlet, Dartrix, and Decidueye because of Forest of Giant Plants, just being able to get Decidueyes out as quickly and consistently as possible. And then 2 Shaymin because Shaymin is Shaymin, and Shaymin lets you draw cards just by playing it down. So, yep, very straightforward Pokemon line. There's no, like, little tricks here and there, like maybe running 1 less Dartrix and a rare candy or something like that. Nope, just straight 4/4/4 Decidueye, 3 Tauros as the attacker, and 2 Shaymin for support. As for the items, running 2 Level Ball to help get out Rowlet and Dartrix early, just that way you don't have to discard them and you can save Ultra Ball for Tauros, Shaymin, or Decidueye. 1 Revitalizer in case you have to Sycamore away some Dartrix or Decidueye, be able to get those right back into your hand and play them down in combination with Forest. 1 Super Rod to do kind of the same thing as Revitalizer. Get Pokemon back into the deck, get energy if in case you overextended, something like that. Basically, these guys are just great if you don't have a Forest down and have to discard some of the evolutions. With Ultra Ball or Sycamore, just make sure that they're useful later in the game. 1 Switch in case you start with a Rowlet and are not able to get a Float Stone on it, or a Shaymin or something like that. That way you don't have to waste your manual attachment to get those guys out of the active spot. 4 Trainers Mail to help with the consistency of this deck. 4 Ultra Ball to get everything out. 4 VS Seeker to reuse all of our supporters. And then I don't like that TCGO moved the stadium to right here, because VS Seeker can really just segue immediately into supporters, and that's what I really liked about it. But now I have to kind of skip over the Forest of Giant Plants and come back to it later to talk about my supporters, so I think that's just what I'm going to keep doing. 4 VS Seeker to reuse all of our supporters. Then as for these supporters, you have the 4/2 of Sycamore and N, along with 2 Lysandre, because Lysandre is just a phenomenal card, and all the competitive decks really are running 2 Lysandre, so that's why I'm starting to run 2. And then 1 Olympia, kind of help with math if Tauros gets damaged a little too much and you don't want it to get knocked out next turn, or your opponent like Lysandre's up a Decidueye and damages it, you can switch those guys back onto the bench and heal damage off them at the same time. Just basically functions the same as Switch. And then 2 Fighting Fury Belt for the Tauros, give them more longevity, allow Rage and Mad Bull GX to have a higher damage cap. 2 Float Stones for our Decidueyes and potentially Shaymin. And then, okay, now I'm going to talk about the stadium. Of course, it's Forest of Giant Plants. It lets you evolve into a Decidueye. Turn 1, which is invaluable. I mean, theoretically, in a perfect scenario, you can get 4 Decidueye up turn 1 and hit for 80 damage with Feather Arrow. I mean, that's just absurd. That is ridiculous. And are you going to be able to do that? I'd say maybe 1 out of every 50 times you'll get a setup that is that perfect, but it does have the potential to happen. Don't get me wrong, it definitely has the potential to happen. But Forest of Giant Plants, I'm running the maximum number of 4 just because you want to get set up as quickly as possible to be able to Feather Arrow and put your opponents down with damage as quickly as you can. As for the energy, 4 DCE, because Tauros and Decidueye, well, and Shaymin for that matter, function on DCE, so want to run the max number of those, and then 5 of the regular grass energy, just for Hollow Hunt and Razor Leaf, and then like manually attach to a Shaymin to retreat or something like that. But yeah, very straightforward deck, but it is a very effective deck, and you know what? I'm done rambling. Let's just go ahead and see this deck in action. Alrighty, we have found one against Beige Dog with a dark and normal deck, so at least we don't have to worry about Garbodor in this matchup. I mean, even if it is a dark deck, at least we don't have to worry about the Garbodor, because that is the one thing that can really just kind of shut this deck down and give this deck a lot of problems. But we do start with something that's pretty solid. I mean, we start with a Forest, we start with a couple Trainers Mail and a Float Stone. This isn't bad. I mean, it could be better, but this isn't bad. And it appears my opponent is running... Yeah, it looks to be like a Darkrai. Well, obviously Darkrai. I mean, that's not what I meant. It looks to be like a Darkrai-centered Dark deck. That's what I meant to say. Okay, so Darkrai Zoroark, that's actually pretty interesting, but what's kind of cool is that Zorua can be KO'd by 3 Feather Arrows and also Horn Attack, so that's pretty solid. Okay, we do... Opponent plays a Darkrai down, and I can Trainer's Mail, see if I can get anything good. Ooh, I get a Fighting Fury Belt. Can definitely work with that. Let's go ahead and Trainer's Mail again. And we get a Level Ball. So, we get absolutely no draw support this turn. That is very, very unfortunate. But what I can do is at least get a Rowlet up. So, I mean, there's something there. Play the energy onto the Tauros. And then just end my turn. So, very slow start for me. Didn't get a draw supporter. Didn't get a Shaymin. Didn't get anything like that. My opponent will be able to start attacking with Darkrai. And this is the awesome thing about Tauros. My opponent did not attack just because they are so scared of Tauros being able to just get another energy and then one-shot their Darkrai. I mean, that Tauros is awesome for that. So what I am going to do, just go ahead and Horn Attack, get 70 damage onto the Darkrai. And the fact that my opponent is deterred from attacking is just so ridiculously great for me. And okay, we do see the Pokemon Center Lady. That is fine. And again, my opponent does not attack just because he is scared of me immediately retaliating with the Mad Bull GX or even just the Rage. And okay, so we're starting to get something going. If I can get an Ultra Ball off this Trainer's Mail, that would be absolutely excellent. Do I want to play the... Yeah, I don't want to play the Super Rod just yet, and I get a Sycamore, so there's something for next turn. That is pretty solid. Let's go ahead and play the Rowlet down, play the energy onto a Dartrix, and then I'm going to wait until next turn to Super Rod just in case my opponent Lysandres or something like that. But yeah, let's Horn Attack, get even more damage off, and this is beautiful because my opponent is too scared to attack. He doesn't want to allow me to take a one-shot with Tauros, so he is just not attacking with his Darkrai, and Tauros is buying me the time that I need. And this is unusually slow for this deck. Normally it doesn't take me this long to get set up. Usually I have usually I have at least one Decidueye right now, usually 2, sometimes 3 by now. But either way, any deck is susceptible to poor draws, and I even get a Decidueye right now. I can get another Dartrix up. And yeah, I think the play is to play it onto the one with energy. Level Ball for a Dartrix. Get potentially another Pokemon up. And I even have another Tauros. I have a Sycamore for next turn. And this deck is finally starting to roll. And then I think Feather Arrow. I think the play right now is to put it onto the active Darkrai. Yeah, that way I can Feather Arrow next turn after I Horn Attack to take a knockout, force my opponent into something, and then go from there. So a very, very good start for me. Well, not a very good start. I ended up with a very good board setup. It was a fairly slow start that ended positively for me. Luckily, my opponent didn't seem to draw anything, so he did just attach and pass with Darkrai, and Darkrai's been too scared to attack because of Rage and Mad Bull GX being able to immediately one-shot anything that my opponent would want to bring back. And we do see, okay, we see the Fighting Fury Belt go onto the bench Darkrai. That is a good play by my opponent. make it a lot more difficult to knock out. This Tauros is going to be in a lot of trouble. I even draw into a Decidueye-GX, which is pretty awesome, so I can play that down, go ahead and force the Giant Plants DCE onto the Tauros, and, well, I have no other option but to Sycamore, so I might as well Sycamore, see if I can get another Decidueye. I do not, so that is kind of unfortunate right there. What I think I'm going to do this turn is go ahead and take the knockout on the Darkrai, see if I can draw into a way of getting another Decidueye or something like that. Yeah, okay, get an Ultra Ball so I can get yet another Decidueye out. And unfortunately, the Zorua is going to be a pain this turn, but, well, I mean, the Zorua will be able to not, well, the Zorua will prevent me from getting damage onto the Darkrai. The Zorua is the thing that is going to go down. That is what I was trying to say before I ended up with a little bit of word vomit. So sorry about that. I am going to get my third Decidueye up, and this is where the deck starts rolling. I'm going to go ahead and Horn Attack. Completely forgot to Feather Arrow with the bench Decidueye, but that's beside the point. Completely ignore that I made a stupid play right there, but we're just going to keep moving. My opponent will bring up a Darkrai. It's going to be able to hit my Tauros for some solid damage, but looks like my opponent will just end me. That is fine with me. He's powering up the Zorua. That's something that I'm going to target down for sure. And, alright, this is a very good play by my opponent. Knock out the Tauros that could potentially one-shot this Darkrai next turn. I mean, if my opponent didn't knock out that Tauros, I could have won just by triple Feather Arrowing the Zorua on the bench and then knocking out the active Darkrai with a Mad Bull GX. But what I am going to do is go ahead and Ultra Ball, grab another Tauros, because, I mean, I have the DCE in my hand. I can go ahead and play that down, and then, let's see, do I want to Shaymin? I think I'm going to Shaymin first. Well, yeah, I'm going to Shaymin, or do I even want to Shaymin? That's the thing. Do I need the extra cards? I don't think I do. So what I am going to do, go ahead and take the prize on the Zorua, keep the Shaymin for later in case I get end. That's the play right there. Go ahead and take that Zorua down to take a prize card and just be one prize away, or one EX knockout away from winning this game, and then just go for a Horn Attack. Get some good damage on the Darkrai, set it up for a combination of Feather Arrow and Horn Attack or something like that. So in a very good position right now. I think we pretty much have this game in the bag because my opponent cannot one-shot a Tauros, so unless he Lysanders, puts it to sleep, and even then, he can't knock me out because that would still only be doing 170. And that's, I mean, we don't even see that my opponent has a way to put my Tauros to sleep. So I'm in an excellent, excellent position right now. I can even just start Feather Arrowing this Darkrai if my opponent tries to retreat it. And we do see, okay, my opponent is going to Lysander up probably, yeah, a Decidueye, get some damage on it. That way I can't Mad Bull GX for the knockout. My opponent is playing very smart. Like, that is a very smart play by my opponent. Only attack a Tauros when you can get a one-shot on it, or if something's already damaged enough to where it'd go down anyway. What I am going to do, I actually win the game right here because I do have the energy on my Decidueye to be able to retreat. Let's go ahead and Feather Arrow 3 times onto the Darkrai, set it up to be knocked out by a Fighting Fury Belt boosted Horn Attack, and we are going to be able to take the game with Decidueye. I mean, the Tauros did most of the damage, but Decidueye definitely set up all of the math to be able to knock out these Darkrai's, and this deck really relies on just smaller attacks, but building up and just taking prizes at inconvenient times for my opponent and being able to maximize off of that and taking prizes during the turn so you can utilize the prize cards during that same turn as opposed to just knocking them out and then praying that your opponent doesn't have an end. So very, very good first game, a lot slower than I would have liked, but Tauros was still able to prevent my opponent from attacking to stall long enough so that I was able to build up Decidueye in the back and eventually just start Feather Arrowing for a ton of damage. So yeah, great first game. Let's go ahead and see if I can find another, hopefully a little bit faster start of a game. Alrighty, we have found another one against Doggars with a normal and dark deck. I mean, I'm just running into all the dark decks right now. So hopefully it's another Darkrai, and hopefully we have the same outcome as last time, but again, with a little bit faster of a start. We do lose the coin flip, so we are going to go second. And I mean, this deck really doesn't mind going second. Like I said, you can attack with a Horn Attack turn 1, you can Feather Arrow turn 1 if you get the right setup. Like, this deck really doesn't mind going first or second. It does mind having to mulligan a couple times because you start with a Decidueye every single time. But luckily, my opponent is mulliganing too, so it's not the worst thing in the world for me. And I start even with an ideal starter. So, I mean, this is an excellent opening hand. This is a very phenomenal opening hand because what I can do is Forest, Float Stone up the Rowlet, and then play the Shaymin for more cards, Ultra Ball for another Rowlet or a Dartrix, and then Sycamore away when I need to. I mean, this is just a really, really great opening hand, and I really hope that my opponent doesn't end me out of it, because this is almost the ideal hand that you want to start with. Okay, I mean, like, not... I guess the super ideal hand would be, like, Tauros, 3 Rowlet, a DCE, a Float Stone, and a Sycamore, but... Well, I guess that's only 7... Yeah, I guess that would be 7 cards, but you would draw another, so it would be 1 Tauros, a DCE, a Fighting Fury Belt, that's 3 cards, then 3 Rowlet, and a Forest, and a Sycamore. Okay, yeah, that's 8 cards right there. So that'd be probably the ideal start for this deck. But either way, I mean, I'm very, very happy with my hand. And no! Oh, my opponent ends me out of it. I mean, that's 100% the right play if your opponent gets an extra card from a mulligan, is to play the N. But, why'd my opponent have to play that? And I do get, I mean, I still get some solid stuff, except for a Forest, which is probably the most necessary, well, it 100% is the most necessary card. So I am going to go ahead and Ultra Ball, get rid of the Switch and the VS Seeker to grab a Shaymin. Hopefully get a Forest. I really hope that I can draw into that somehow. But okay, here we go. Get another Rowlet. Alright, how deep do I want to go? So what I think I'm going to do is... Okay, how deep do I want to dig? Do I want to just cut my losses? Get another Rowlet out? Or do I want to grab another Shaymin? I think the play is Ultra Ball away, the Sycamore, and the Decidueye, because, I mean, I have Revitalizer, I have Super Rod, I have ways of getting it back. Draw a Shaymin, play down another Rowlet, and then just pray. Just pray that I can get a Forest off of this, because, I mean, at that point, I will have gone through half my deck, and oh, there we go. That is gorgeous. So I get the Forest, I get a DCE, I get another Dartrix, and that's beautiful. That is great for me. And then let's just Sycamore away the rest of my hand. I will be able to not get a knockout, unfortunately, and donk my opponent, but, I mean, I even draw into 2 Decidueye. So this is a phenomenal start. Like, this is exactly... Like, this is about as good of a start as you would hope for with this deck. I mean, get a couple Decidueye out, get a Fighting Fury Belt on Tauros, and be able to Horn Attack for maximum damage immediately. That's, I mean, like I said, exactly what you want with this deck, and I'll even be able to put the Yveltal in range of being knocked out by just a Feather Arrow next turn. So if my opponent attacks me, well, that's just more damage on me, and I can even counter my opponent's Reverse Valley with a Forest that's in my hand, even though it really doesn't matter at this point, because my bench is kind of set, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But my opponent does get an Eevee down. That is going to be a little bit of a nuisance, but the Yveltal will be the main attacker that I have to watch out for. Luckily, with this deck, I really don't have to worry about Yveltal hitting for insane amounts of damage, because Tauros with the Fighting Fury Belt is already insanely bulky, but I'm only attacking for a DCE. Like, my opponent would have to be insanely loaded up in order to be able to Evil Ball Tauros for a one-hit knockout. And by then, I would have enough Feather Arrows on it to where I'd be able to just retaliate immediately and take a knockout. So I'm in a fantastic position right now. My opponent's in a good position as well, due to having an Umbreon up, having an Yveltal. With 2 energy down, I will be able to take the knockout on my opponent's Yveltal this turn. And do I want to deck thin? No, I think I just want a Sycamore at this point, because I can always just play the guys back down. And then go ahead and Fighting Fury Belt onto this Tauros, Feather Arrow, knock out my opponent's Yveltal, make him send something else in that will get Horn Attacked, And unfortunately, Rage is going to do exactly as much as a Horn Attack, so it's really not going to do much. And then I am just going to Feather Arrow onto the Yveltal, start getting that thing set up to be knocked out, and then Horn Attack, hit the Umbreon for some very solid damage, and go from there. So, great start for me. My opponent, not so much, but hey, we take those. We definitely take those. My opponent will be able to strafe this turn for 30 damage, but that will allow me to actually one-shot my opponent's Yveltal EX, which is, I mean, exactly what I need. And I do draw into some pretty solid stuff. I mean, I like double Trainers Mail because it gives me options. I mean, I prefer the guarantee of having a Sycamore or something next turn, but Trainers Mail is sometimes just as good, being able to search and grab. So, I mean, usually it can result in a supporter, which is kind of what I'm hoping for, because my opponent's probably just going to hit me for 30 and go from there. But actually, my opponent goes for the Dartrix GX, which was incredibly effective at this point. That was a very, very good use of the GX attack because it eliminates all the energy I have on board. Luckily, I do draw straight into a Sycamore, and I can hopefully draw into a DCE, but what I am going to do is, yeah, I'm not going to grab that Forest of Giant Plants. I am just going to Sycamore, hopefully draw into one of my other 3 DCEs, which I do get, luckily for me. Let's go ahead and play that down. I have the Revitalizer in case my opponent manages to knock out a Decidueye. Just grab those guys right back into my hand and play them back down in combination with Forest. But at this point, I'm in a very, very good position, because I can just go ahead and play the DCE onto the Tauros, start setting up the Umbreon, I think, a little bit more for knockouts from Feather Arrow, and I think that's the play this turn. Because while my opponent can manually retreat his Umbreon, he's either going to go for Strafe, which will switch into the Yveltal anyway, get his Umbreon out of harm's way, meaning I'll have to pick it off with a Feather Arrow, or he's going to Shadow Bullet, which allows me to take the knockout, take 2 prizes, and then attack whatever my opponent decides to bring up. If he brings up the baby Yveltal, that thing's going to have a 2 retreat cost. And if he brings up the Yveltal EX, well, I can just Mad Bull GX. And my opponent is just going to strafe, go into his Yveltal EX. I think that is a huge, huge mistake, because now what I can do is I can actually take a 4-prize turn right now, because I can Feather Arrow, go ahead and knock out my opponent's Umbreon GX that's on the bench, take 2 prizes from that. I really don't think there's anything I particularly need right now. Super Rod's always nice to have, but I don't really need. I don't need to Super Rod anything back in. I might, but I probably won't. And then I can just Feather Arrow the Fright Knight Yveltal, and then at this point I can just go ahead and Mad Bull GX, knock out my opponent's Yveltal EX. And yeah, I mean, Tauros, usually you just start Horn attacking for 70. That's the attack that I found that I use 90% of the time. However, Rage can come in handy in some situations, but then Mad Bull GX, if you even just have a little bit of damage on you, that can just be like, okay, you are deleted. And that's exactly what I was able to do with my opponent's Yveltal EX. And he's going to Lysandre in a Shaymin. And, I mean, this is game. Like, I win. I really do win at this point. I have my choice of switching options. I decided to show off the Olympia because I can. I really can. And what I can now do is go ahead and DCE up the Tauros. I mean, really, this is all kind of a formality, because I can just Feather Arrow twice, set the Yveltal up to be knocked out by a Rage, and I will be able to take the game. So, yeah, there we go. I'm just going to click Rage, win the game, knock out my opponent's last Yveltal, and yeah, Tauros was able to come through against an Yveltal deck. Luckily, without Garbodor. If my opponent had a Garbodor, that would be a lot more worrisome. However, Horn Attack with Fighting Fury Belt has some excellent math, and if I'm able to get my Decidueye set up quickly, I'll be able to start stacking damage onto the Trubbish to where hopefully it doesn't have time to get up into a Garbodor to be able to shut off my abilities. So yeah, that is the deck, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed playing it. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. Leave your answer to the question of the day in the comment section below. And this is Styx signing out. Why not? See you guys.